We left off before saying that there was a period of time where something happened where the soul came into man. And according to the scientific world, they know that there was this change. We can date it almost, but they don't know what happened. They can't account for it. From our perspective, we say God breathed the soul of life, the soul into mankind.
The humanity, the soul of humanity.
Right. So I'd like to bring up, we spoke very briefly before, just to lay it out there and suggest something. I don't believe in this theory necessarily, but it was a theory that was put out there by a thinker called Terence McKenna. He was the first one of the first ones from America to go into the South American jungle and experiment with mind-altering plants from shaman tribes out there. And he came up with a theory called the stoned ape theory, which said that these earlier human-looking...
the stoned... That's very... The stoned ape theory.
Correct.
So I almost didn't catch it. Yeah, stoned.
The stoned ape theory. And he speculated that as these individuals started leaving the trees or whatever it was and coming out into the open fields, they started to find certain psychoactive plants, whether it be psychedelic mushrooms or other plants. There's lots of them out in the world. They started to experiment with them, which led to a boom of insight, thought, and creativity, which helped them be better hunters, more creative with building structures. Survival went up, and they bred and they became much more advanced than everyone around them that didn't have these plants that are known for mind expansion. So I thought that was somewhat interesting to me. And then I went a little deeper. We spoke about before that there's a gland in our brain called the pineal gland, which is a singular gland, and it's called the third eye. It's structured like an eye. It has the muscles and the rods like a retina and the cornea and all these things. And from this gland, there was a scientist in America, Dr. Rick Strassman, who did a lot of research on it, and we've suspected, and we're pretty close to proving, that dimethyltryptamine, a chemical called DMT, secretes from this gland when we dream at night. This chemical is known to be the most psychoactive, the most psychedelic chemical on planet Earth. And it secretes from this one gland called the pineal gland. And I found it interesting because when Jacob fights the angel in the Torah of Esau, he names the place when he's done Peniel, which means the face of God. And then we see later on all these plants that the people of Israel are planting and taking with them into Israel and making all these things. One of the major plants in the Torah is the Atzei Shittim, acacia wood, and which anyone can look on Wikipedia today. Acacia wood is one of the main hosts of this chemical, DMT, dimethyltryptamine.
Really?
Yeah.
And DMT is known to be psychedelic.
The most psychoactive chemical
That's
known
a
to
scientific
mankind.
fact.
Yes.
This tree is continuously mentioned.
Yes. So I'm saying, the story culminates with the high priest. The story of the Torah culminates with the high priest standing in the temple one day, once a year, in a room filled with smoke. That was his job, to bring the incense and the coals in this little room and put.
Wait a minute. That's it. I should realize the coals are made from the wood.
That's interesting. Also, I have no clue what the coals were made.
No, I'm just realizing it. To get that incense, you can't just bring in this pot of something. It's got to be burning, right? It's burnt because it says in the text. It says he burned the incense.
Correct.
Incense burned, but something's making the fire also.
Correct.
So the acacia wood would also be part of that incense.
That would be a fascinating thing if they were making coals out of acacia extract.
Well, what are they making it from? They didn't have a coal mine in the.
I've never thought about that, but the fact you suggested, it opens up a whole.
It's the only wood that's mentioned.
So this is very interesting. So from my perspective, I'm learning the Torah, and I'm like, wait a minute, okay. The whole story of the Bible, Moses, the sea splitting, everything culminates with this one man, one day a year, going in this room to stand in a room filled with smoke. That's the Jewish law. He's got to wait for it to be filled with smoke, then he walks out slowly backwards, and the people of Israel is forgiven. This is where I press pause. And I say, wait a minute, are you trying to tell me this story starts off with a man in a garden who has a bad relationship with some type of tree, gets kicked out of the garden, forms a nation for the sole sake of fixing that issue to get back to the garden? The first thing this nation does is go to the lowest spiritual place on planet Earth in Egypt, plant certain plants, stare at those plants according to our commentaries, leave one day to cut down those plants, take them out with them, start making all these extracts and implements, and build a temple where one man one day once a year could stand in a room filled with plant extract smoke. If we can't see that this story is a very intimate story between locked parts of our mind and the plants of the world, then we're not really reading the Torah. And this is why also when we did the Ketorah, the incense offering in the Holy Temple, we say that this was an actual rectification for the sin of Adam. And we also say when Adam sinned, his light went into the earth, literally. The earth absorbed and sucked up his light. So now that we're naturally producing DMT in our minds, and we're also finding DMT in plants.
DMT in our brains.
Yes.
Because the mind may be different from the brain.
Yeah, that's why I speak to hang out with doctors. They draw the line that we find these chemicals occurring in our bodies naturally, but we also find the same exact chemicals in the earth, and that we're able to take them out of the earth and have experiences that open up our mind. Well, I'm not suggesting that that's what humanity should be doing going forward, but I'm suggesting we're going to come to a place one day where we're not going to need to take these chemicals out of the earth anymore to open up dormant parts of our mind. We have the internal technology to get there one day, and that's part of this redemption of humanity, is really utilizing our dormant mind and what it really, our dormant brain, or however you want to say it, and what it could do.
This is extraordinary.
But the interesting thing also I noticed is that ancient Egypt, I believe they say I may be corrected, that their gods Horus and I think Osiris, or two of their main gods, were born forth from the acacia tree. That's ancient Egyptian mythology.
Right.
And even you see Freemasons today, their highest order of symbolism is the acacia tree.
What?
Yes, Freemasonry has one of their highest orders of symbolism is the acacia tree. This is, everyone could look it up on the internet if they'd like. And even in South America, you see that this chemical, their religions or shamanism is based off of this one chemical, DMT, where they mix it with a root that allows it to be ingested, which is called ayahuasca today, which all the celebrities around the world, it's a very trendy thing, are traveling to South America to do this. So I see that there's a very strong theme that weaves all ancient cultures together. And I believe that part of this is that the Torah or Judaism open-sourced spirituality, as far as where other cultures would have their shaman and their priest, and they kind of created caste systems.
Beautiful.
Yes, and we were like, no, mind expansion doesn't empower you to be better than someone else. The high priest of Israel was a high priest, but he was the humblest of all men. You could have knocked on his door and asked him to sleep over for the night and eat at his table. He would have been your best friend.
Because when he came out and took off his garments, he was just Harry.
Yeah, exactly. So we have a lot more to uncover. We're here on the front lines in Jerusalem, where we have all the minds of the world showing up here, and I suspect this is just the tip of the iceberg of really uncovering what's going on.
DMT is from the acacia wood,
yes,
and it's also
many different species of acacia wood, but specifically the ones found in the Sinai area. Amongst other grasses in the world that could be found other places.
Consumed, and he had to be burning something. I mean, when you bring the spice, to fill that room, the Holy of Holies, with smoke, you had to be burning something.
Yes. Well, so the verse is very clear. He went with two things in his hand: one, a pan of hot coals, and one, a pan of the incense. He would take 2 handfuls according to the size of his hand. When he gets in there, he puts the coals on the floor, and he places the incense on the coals, and it bursts into a cloud of smoke. Maimonides, the commentary, said the law was and is that he had to wait a few minutes for the whole room to be filled with smoke. It wasn't enough for the smoke to come and he did a job. He had to actually sit there and wait for the whole room. So whatever that was, he was inhaling it. There's not a question about that.
Frankincense was one of the right? Okay.
Which is also known to have certain psychoactive properties.
And how? I looked up a few days ago because I was working on the incense. Many of them were how do you say, they would induce meditation, or the things that we call psychedelic.
And certain chemicals aren't active unless combined with one another. For example, this drink that they do in South America called ayahuasca, it's the combination of DMT. If you eat DMT, it doesn't do anything to you. You have to mix it with, I think, an MAO inhibitor, which allows your body to accept it. When those two are mixed and you drink it, then it's a 5 to 6 hour experience, which they say resets your neurological traumas, and it heals you and it guides you, all these things that are said about it. Those two, out of all the millions and billions of chemicals that these South American jungle tribes could have figured out how to combine, they knew how to combine these ones. So when we were combining certain unique chemicals and stuff, we have to be humbled and have no clue what mind expansion properties these things may have had.
It makes all the sense in the world. And it's not hocus pocus. That's what I think that's so important what you're saying. It's not hocus pocus. These are
grounded in various principles. And just furthermore, there's other chemicals that we speculate. For example, they say when they're talking about the anointing oil, there was one of the chemicals in it was cannabosum, which was translated as to fine reeds. I think it was Rabbi Aryeh Kaplan in his commentary says this could be referring to the cannabis plant, cannabosum, which is also has psychoactive properties. And when extracted into oil and you put that oil on your forehead, that could actually seep into your body. Now, I don't come out and say I'm pro or against any of these things because I'm very neutral. However, I will say that there's a lot to be looked into over here for us to uncover really what was going on, what the purpose of the people of Israel were, and what does it mean to get back into the garden and to rectify everything.
And why would the Bible identify these specific components unless they were significant?
Correct.
So we have to learn what the significance is, because then that will lead us to why the Bible and how they interacted with these persons that have essentially shaped the world.
Yes.
I mean, shaped the world.
Yeah. Well, for example, we spend so many verses dealing with all these plants. When it comes to Moses and the Revelation, it could be 2 or 3 verses. Abraham gets a revelation, 1 or 2 verses. Yeah. Plants and all these things, over and over, repeating and string. So it's really the Torah doesn't waste words, and so we really see that there's a stress here, and that's where we're going to come full circle, where the Rabbi Eliyahu Kramer, the Vilna Gaon, said, in the future, the sciences and the spirituality merge. So you may have a guy like Terence McKenna who had the stoned ape theory, and you may have this other theory that the soul came into Adam. The two theories may not be so far off.
There's the Gaon of Vilna that said when the Torah was given on Sinai, only half was given to Moses, and the other half was hidden in the secrets of the world. And only when it's like the black fire and the white fire, that only when we understand the secrets of the world, we'll be able to understand the whole Torah. And Maimonides, in the Guide for the Perplexed, are point blank. If you want to understand how God acts in this world, not how we have to act. The Torah says frontal teaching. Do this, don't do that, eat this, don't, and that's frontal teaching. But if we want to understand the whole Torah, he says in Introduction to God for the Perplexed, we first have to understand nature.
Just to continue one final point on this topic, we have this thing called the pineal gland, which we discussed, which is responsible for melatonin, serotonin secretions, but also we say the dimethyltryptamine secretions in our body. There's one chemical today in our diets that actually calcify and dry out the pineal gland, which turns it from a healthy, grape-looking structure into a raisin all dried out and hard, and that is fluoride. Fluoride, at the end of someone's life, after 120, when they do whatever scan it is, and they look, that part of their brain becomes hard like a rock and calcifies. And they find that all the fluoride is depositing there. Now, we have to do more research, but they say one of the first times fluoride was ever introduced into the water system was Nazi Germany's were using fluoride to experiment with, and it was put into the Jewish water in their concentration camps in the ghetto. That's not an official fact yet, but there's a lot of reason to believe it based on what I've learned and read. And so today in Israel, there's a growing movement amongst the religious population who are learning about this connection between DMT and the pineal gland to take fluoride out of their diet for the sake of spirituality.
That's interesting. That I'd never heard, because we know that fluoride was introduced about 15 years ago or so into the water. I'm just thinking my toothpaste at the moment has fluoride in it.
Correct. So they've also proven that we don't need the fluoride in the toothpaste. There's actually fluoridosis, I think, where we're over-fluoriding ourselves and we get certain issues from it. I'm brushing with Tom's toothpaste, which I don't know if I will continue. I think they were bought by a company that's not so, doesn't have too much integrity. But people at home are making their own toothpaste with, I think, baking soda and salt.
My
and
father, of
turmeric.
blessed memory, died with all of his teeth except one in his mouth at 90-something, 92.
God bless.
And he used salt and baking soda.
Exactly.
And sometimes with peroxide, and one of my aunts who lived at a similar age used that also, and maybe and a mixture of peroxide with it, but I just made the salt. But my father used salt and baking soda.
So this is part of the coming revolution.
Yeah.
I know we said one last final point I just want to bring up to you, because we were speaking about acacia wood and how they would coat it with gold in the temple. I just want to run this by you. Let's say I'm an electrician, and I have no connection to spirituality or the Torah, and I'm reading the Torah. And all of a sudden I see, these people were in ancient Egypt, and one thing we knew about ancient Egypt was they used to line their pyramids with quartz crystal, the insides of the Great Pyramid with quartz crystal.
I didn't know that.
Yes. Yeah. The inside of the Great Pyramid, where they have the king's chamber, is a hollow chamber, and the inside is lined with quartz crystal. We've never even found a pharaoh in there to suspect that was a burial tomb, but that's what they say today. And they have these...
but they found the quartz crystal.
Yeah, oh yes, it's still lined with quartz crystal. And there's these air tunnels that flow up into that chamber that push up air. Yeah. And they actually have tuners over there to tune the air, where you can kind of create this certain frequency. Today, scientifically, we know if quartz crystal is vibrated at a certain frequency, it actually secretes electricity. That's a scientific fact.
Well, because there were radios that used a crystal, no battery, just I actually built one when I was young.
Correct. So that's really cool. So
you get a kit. I didn't even.
No, so the insides of these pyramids are lined with this quartz crystal, and they're vibrating air that's shooting into it. So we have a lot of reason to suspect that maybe the people of ancient Egypt were experimenting or using electricity systems. So the fact is, yes, it is lined with quartz crystal. There is an empty box sitting where they suspected maybe the tomb of a pharaoh, which was very close measurements of the size of the Ark of the Covenant. The first thing the Israelites do when they go to when they leave Egypt is build an Ark of the Covenant. So if I'm an electrician reading this, what's the Ark of the Covenant? You're taking two metals and separating them by a non-conductor. You have two.
I've heard this.
Yes,
theory.
And you have two cherubim on top, which are two poles. It could be the positive and negative, and so that's from an electrician's point of view, a capacitor where you can store and discharge electricity. So they did.
And the air is dry. It's important that the air is very dry.
Correct. We were in the desert. I guess we have dry air. They did a study once. I'm not going to quote too much of the study, where they were able to send certain electromagnetic pulses into the brain and create this hallucinations or open up mind expansion through. So I was wondering, if we're gonna, as we do this research, if there was a connection between the use of electricity technology and mind expansion. Why were the pharaohs wearing gold things or the high priests wearing gold on their foreheads in certain places? Was there any connection there? But
I can't even comment on it, but
that's way down the road of theory. I didn't say anything on that, for sure I know about, but these are all, we're trying to put together these pieces to align the sciences and the ancient technologies and the Torah and the spirituality.
It does have the idea of because notice that it was lined with gold inside and outside.
Correct.
It's a spiritual statement. You should be gold inside and outside. That's a philosophical understanding, but you do have two metals, very, very good conductors, separated by a non-conductor, and that's how a capacitor is made.
Yes, with two rods, one attached to one metal and one attached to the other metal.
If that's the way it was,
Yes.
So, and I guess it certainly could be. I'm not saying it is,
neither am I.
But it does have. If you told a person you have a good insulator separating two metals, could that accumulate a charge?
Well.
And that's what Harold Hedgett, in blessed memory, made the man who, I was very close with him, the strobe light, the flashing light, is all based on discharge of a capacitor. He designed the first circuit that could do that, and needless to say, it did him quite well financially besides that. But, the strobe is, now we have cameras that are so fast, it's subtlety, so you don't need that. But in those days, you had not just a flash bulb on the camera, but you want to take a picture of an atomic bomb as it explodes at different stages, or a bullet going through an apple. So you need very distinct flashes. And that's the result of a capacitor discharging and giving off bursts of light that last fractions of a microsecond at different stages. So anyway,
not always the good ideas lead to a lot of financial success. You look at Nikola Tesla, who died poor and broke, and his patents taken away from him, but contributed a lot. I think we've touched on a tremendous amount of information today. Put it there on that note, and thank you.
No, thank you. It was interesting.
Yeah, we'll get to the bottom of things.